Everyone, for this week you're going to have to analyze chapter 12 of the Second Treatise of Government by John Locke. And this can be a little complicated, kind of understanding what he's saying and the purpose of his passages. So for this video, I'm going to analyze chapter 9 and kind of model what you're going to need to do when you're completing the assignment that analyzes the chapter 12 of this week. So let's go ahead and dive in, okay? Chapter 9, the purposes of political society and government. Section 123. If man, in the state of nature, is as free as I have said he is, if he is absolute lord to his own person and possessions, equal to the greatest and subject to nobody, why will he part with his freedom? Why will he give up his lordly status and subject himself to the control of someone else's power? The answer is obvious. Though in the state of nature he has an unrestricted right to his possessions, he is far from assured that he will be able to get to the use of them, because they are constantly exposed to invasion by others. All men are kings as much as he is. Every man is equal, and most men are not strict observers of fairness and justice. So his hold on the property he has in this state is very unsafe, very insecure. This makes him willing to leave a state in which he is very free, but which is full of fears and continual dangers, and not unreasonably he looks for others with whom he can enter into a society for a mutual preservation of their lives, liberties, and estates, which I call by the general name property. The others may be ones who are already united in such a society, or ones who would like to be so united. Okay, so if we summarize what he's saying here in his introduction, he's saying, why would a man part with his freedom? If everyone is created equal, but why does a man give up his rights? And he's saying that very plainly here that the answer is that it's great if he has that freedom, but he may not be able to use them because it makes him victim to others. It exposes him to be invaded by others. So that can be very scary. So in order to protect himself and his properties, he needs to unite with others and live in a society where there are rules and restrictions. Okay, so let's look at what he's saying here. So the great and chief purpose of men's uniting into commonwealths and putting themselves under government is the preservation of their property. The state of nature lacks many things that are needed for this. I shall discuss three of them. First, the state of nature lacks an established, settled, known law, received and accepted by common consent, as the standard of right and wrong, and as the common measure to decide all controversies. What about the law of nature? Well, it is plain and intelligible to all reasonable creatures, but men are biased by self-interest as well as ignorant about the law of nature because they don't study it, and so they aren't apt to accept it as a law that will bind them if it is applied to their particular cases. Secondly, the state of nature lacks a known and impartial judge, with authority to settle all differences according to the established law. In that state, everyone is both judge and enforcer of the law of nature, and few men will play either role well. Men are partial to themselves, so that passion and revenge are very apt to carry them too far, and with too much heat in their own cases, and their negligence and lack of concern will make them remiss of other men's cases. Thirdly, the state of nature often lacks a power to back up and support a correct sentence, and to enforce it properly. People who have committed crimes will usually, if they can, resort to force to retain the benefits of their crime. This includes using force to resist punishment, and such resistance often makes the punishment dangerous, even destructive, to those who try to inflict it. Okay, so in these three sections, John Locke is talking about the three main reasons why men do in fact leave nature and go to a political society. He first says is because the first reason is that there are no set rules in nature. Men are biased with self-interest and they are more concerned about themselves. So that can lead to a lot of scary things because there's no law that will bind people to behave the way that they're supposed to. And the second reason is that in a society, in nature, there is no society that has rules. Man in nature is both the judge and the enforcer of the law, and few people, he thinks, actually plays this role very well because they don't, there's way too much heat that goes with it, they are just negligent, or they just don't care about what other people are going through. So in a society, then, somebody will actually care about, making sure rules are enforced and there's a right from wrong. Thirdly, he states that there's no power to back up a correct sentence, and if you have to be the enforcer, it can be quite intimidating because those men who are taking from others or doing something that's is wrong, they usually resist punishment, or they resist having to correct their wrongs, and sometimes it can even be dangerous or destructive. So a lot of men don't want to have that responsibility to stick up for themselves and to enforce those rules. So that's why we have a society for those who would. Alright, so he continues and says, thus mankind are in poor shape while they remain in the state of nature, despite all their privileges there, so that they are quickly driven into society. That is why we seldom find any number of men living together for long in the state. The drawbacks it exposes to them make them take refuge under the established laws of government and seek there to preserve their property. This is what makes each one of them so willingly give up their power of punishing, a power then to be exercised only by whoever is appointed to that role. This is being done by whatever rules are agreed on by the community or by those whom they have authorized to draw up the rules for them. This is the basic cause as well as the basic justification for legislative and executive powers within government, as well as for the governments and societies themselves. Alright, so here he wraps up this first part of his argument. He's saying, okay, so this, for the three reasons I just gave you, this is why men often are driven to society and the privileges that are there, because there are many drawbacks to expose them to some dangers. So they provide a selected number of people to put together those laws and allow them to put together those rules so they have a functioning society where people won't take advantage of one another, and there's a power of punishing and a power to be exercised only by those who've been appointed to that role. Okay? So we want to make sure in our society that we have a few people that we trust to put together those laws. And that is why people often quickly come to a society that's being governed. Alright, so let's go over this, the second half. For in the state of nature, a man has, along with his liberty to enjoy innocent delights, two powers. The first is to do whatever he thinks fit for the preservation of himself and of others, so far as the law of nature permits. This law makes him and all the rest of mankind into one community, one society, distinct from all creatures. And if it weren't for the corruption and viciousness of degenerate men, there would be no need for any other law. No need for men to separate from this great natural community and, by positive agreements, combine into separate smaller associations. The other power a man has in the state of nature is the power to punish crimes committed against the law of nature. He gives up both of these powers when he joins a particular politic society, a private one, so to speak, and brings himself to any commonwealth separate from the rest of mankind. So he says here, okay, so there, along with the liberty to enjoy innocent delights, two powers, he's basically he joins the society to preserve himself. And if it weren't for people, being evil, there would be no need for these societies to be created. But since there is corruption and there is viciousness, there has to be some sort of way to structure society where we keep these people in check. Okay, so he talks about how a man gives up 2 powers when he joins a political society. So let's read about these. The first power he gives up to be regulated by laws made by the society so as far as required for the preservation of himself and the rest of society. Such laws greatly restrict the liberty he has under the nature of law. Secondly, he wholly gives up the power of punishing the natural force that he could use for punishment in the state of nature. He now puts at the disposal of the executive power of society. Now that he is in a new state in which he will enjoy many advantages from the labor, assistance, and the society of others in the same community, as well as the protection from the strength in the community as a whole. He must also give up something, for he will have to part with much of his natural freedom to provide himself as required for the welfare, prosperity, and safety of the society, as well as being necessary. This is fair because the other members of the society are doing the same thing. Okay, so the 2 powers he gives up. The first is being able to regulate the rules made by society. He's much more restricted in his liberties than he was under the law of nature. And he's also giving up that power to punish those with the natural force he could use. He now, instead of being able to punish people the way he feels, he's giving up that power to the society for them to make that proper judgment. But in giving that up, there is something that's fair in this, is because everyone who's in the society is also falling into those same rules, and they all agree to these terms, and that is why this is fair. Okay, our last section here. But though men who enter into society give up the equality, liberty, and executive power they had in the state of nature, each of them does this with the intention of better preserving himself, his liberty, and property, for no rational creature can be thought to change a condition intending to make it worse. So the power of the society or legislator that they create can never be supposed to extend further than the common good. It is obliged to secure everyone's property by providing against it the 3 defects mentioned above in sections 124 through 26. The ones that made the state of nature so unsafe and so easy. Whoever has the legislative or supreme power in any commonwealth, therefore, is bound to one governed by established standing laws promulgated and known to the people, and not by on-the-spot decrees, with unbiased and upright judges appointed to apply those laws in deciding controversies, and to employ the forces of the community at home only in the enforcement of such laws, or abroad to prevent or correct foreign injuries and secure the community from attack. And all of this is to be directed to the peace, safety, and public good of the people, and nothing else. So here John Locke is wrapping up what he's saying by saying that he gives up these powers, but they do so, and everyone does so, for the greater good, so that everyone follows these same rules and everyone has these same laws. So we can, if we think about what he's saying here, he's saying that the biggest reason that men give up their freedoms is the preservation of their property and to protect themselves from those who aren't good. And he presents this argument, the text structure he provides this in, if you think about it, it's cause and effect. So here are the causes of why somebody would give up their freedoms, and the effects of this are that they live in a much more structured society. And he does a really nice job of providing the supports to every one of his arguments. And he really wants people to think about why we do live in this structured society and the importance of this. So as you're completing chapter 12, think about how I summarized here, how I thought about his purpose, and the way the text was structured, because these are things that you're going to have to do in your assignment. Thank you very much, and don't hesitate to ask questions.